I'm Madeleine Medina, 34, and I used to believe that some wounds never heal. 10 years ago, Marcus Caldwell didn't just break up with me, he shattered my faith in love itself. Standing in our college apartment, boxes packed around me, he delivered his final blow. You'll never find anyone who could love you the way I did. You're too broken, Maddie, too much work. Those words haunted me through sleepless nights and countless therapy sessions. They whispered in my ear during every failed first date, every relationship that fizzled before it began. For years, I carried his verdict like a death sentence. But last weekend, walking into our 10-year reunion with my husband David's hand in mine, something shifted. The moment Marcus's eyes fell on my wedding ring, a simple, platinum band that represented everything he said. I'd never have his face went white. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about second chances, healing, and the power of proving someone devastatingly wrong. I still have the college acceptance letter somewhere in my memory, box yellowed paper with embossed letterhead that once represented everything I dreamed of becoming. Northwestern University, communications major, full scholarship. My parents had framed a copy and hung it in the hallway right next to my high school graduation photo where I'm beaming with the confidence of someone who believed the world was full of endless possibilities. That was the girl Marcus met in September 2014. During freshman orientation week, I was 18, eager, and completely unprepared for someone like him. Marcus Caldwell was everything I thought I wanted tall. Charismatic, with dark hair that fell just right and a smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was a junior studying business, already established in the social hierarchy that seemed so important back then. When he approached me at the welcome mixer, drink in hand, confidence radiating from every gesture, I felt chosen. You're not like the other freshman girls, he said, leaning against the wall beside me as I nursed a red Solo cup of questionable punch. There's something different about you, Madeleine. I should have asked what he meant by that. I should have wondered why comparing me to other women was his opening line. Instead, I felt flattered. Special. He saw something in me that others didn't, or so I believed. Our first few months were intoxicating. Marcus knew all the best spots on campus, the professors who were easy graders, which parties were worth attending. He introduced me to his friends as my freshman, always with that possessive tone that I mistook for affection. He'd pick me up after my classes, sometimes surprising me with coffee or flowers, making me feel important and cherished. You don't need to hang out with those girls from your dorm, he'd say when I mentioned plans with my floor mates. They're just jealous of what we have. Besides, I thought we could spend the evening together. I missed you today. It seemed romantic then, his desire to monopolize my time, his jealousy when other guys talked to me, the way he'd analyze my friendships and point out their flaws. He had a way of making his opinions sound like gentle guidance, his control feel like protection. By November, I was spending most nights in his off-campus apartment. By December, I'd stopped going to the dining hall with my floor mates altogether. By January, when they stopped inviting me, Marcus was there to comfort me. See? I told you they weren't real friends, he said, pulling me close as I cried over the growing distance from girls who had once felt like sisters. You have me. That's all you need. The acceptance letter, once a symbol of my bright future, got buried under textbooks and forgotten dreams. I was too busy learning to see myself through Marcus's eyes to remember who I'd been before he defined me. I found my old journals when I was packing to move in with David years later. Page after page of my own handwriting documenting a slow descent I hadn't even recognized while living it. The entries from sophomore year tell a story I wish I could have seen clearly at the time. October 5th, 10th, Marcus says I talk too much in class. Maybe he's right, Professor Martinez did seem annoyed when I asked about the media ethics assignment. I should listen more. November 3rd, had to cancel coffee with Sarah again. Marcus planned a surprise dinner and seemed hurt that I wasn't more excited. He does so much for me. I need to be more grateful. December 12th, got a B+ on my journalism project. Marcus says I'm not applying myself, though I could do better if I focused more on school instead of trying to impress everyone. He's probably right. I do get distracted easily. Reading those entries now, I can see the patterns so clearly it makes me physically sick. Every doubt, every insecurity, every erosion of my self-confidence carefully planted and watered by someone who claimed to love me. Marcus had a gift for making his cruelty sound like concern. When I got excited about joining the campus newspaper, he'd ask if I was sure I had time for another commitment. I just worry about you overextending yourself, babe. You've seemed stressed lately. When I'd talk about my classes, he'd listen, with this patient expression that suggested I was being naive or superficial. You know that professor is just filling your head with liberal propaganda, right? He'd say after I'd share something I'd learned in my media studies course, the real world doesn't work like that. You'll understand when you graduate. He had an opinion about everything my clothes. That dress is a little attention-seeking, don't you think? My career aspirations. Journalism is a dying field, Maddie. Maybe you should consider something more stable. Even my family. Your mom seems anxious all the time. Does that run in your family? Closing parenthesis. The journal entries from junior year show how completely I'd internalized his voice. February 8th. Bombed the interview for this summer internship at Channel 7. Marcus was right. I'm not ready for that level of competition. Maybe I should focus on getting better grades instead of reaching so high. March 20th. Mom called asking why I don't come home as much. Didn't know how to explain that Marcus needs me here. She wouldn't understand. She's never had a relationship like ours. April 14th. Wore the blue dress Marcus bought me to the awards ceremony. 3 people complimented it. Marcus says I looked beautiful, but that I shouldn't get too used to compliments. They'll make me vain. I stopped writing in the journal during senior year. Looking back, I think it's because some part of me knew that if I kept documenting what was happening, I'd have to face the truth about what my life had become. By then, I rarely spoke up in class. I dropped out of most activities. My grades had slipped from dean's list to barely passing. I spent most of my time in Marcus's apartment, cooking his meals, doing his laundry, listening to him complain about professors and classmates while I nodded along supportively. You're the only one who really gets me, Maddie, he'd say, and I'd feel grateful to be so needed, so essential to someone's happiness. The girl who had walked into Northwestern with a full scholarship and boundless dreams had been replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone small and careful and constantly apologetic. Someone who checked her phone anxiously when she was away from Marcus for more than an hour, who had learned to edit herself so thoroughly that she'd forgotten what her own unfiltered thoughts sounded like. That acceptance letter I'd been so proud of seemed like it belonged to a different person entirely. And in many ways, it did. The cardboard boxes still haunt me sometimes. 3 years of my life reduced to 6 medium-sized containers, taped shut and labeled in my careful handwriting. Books, clothes, kitchen stuff. Such ordinary labels for the dismantling of everything. I thought as my future it started with a phone call from my sister Elena on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in Marcus's kitchen, preparing dinner, his favorite lasagna that took 3 hours to make properly when my phone buzzed. Maddie, thank God, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Elena's voice was strained, worried. Dad's in the hospital. He had a heart attack. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. What? When? Is he okay? He's stable now, but Maddie, where have you been? We've been calling, texting. Mom is beside herself. She needs you. I stared at my phone, seeing the missed calls I'd silenced at Marcus's request. He doesn't like when I'm distracted during our time together, I told myself. It's just for a few hours. I have to come home, I said to Marcus when he walked in 20 minutes later. Dad's in the hospital. Marcus set down his briefcase with deliberate calm. I thought we discussed this. The company mixer is Thursday. Night, I need you there. My father almost died, Marcus. But he didn't, right? Any being there won't change anything. Your family's just being dramatic, you know how they are. He moved to the stove, lifting the lid on the sauce. This needs more oregano. Something cracked inside me then. Maybe it was the casual way he dismissed my father's heart attack, or how he criticized my cooking while my world was falling apart. Maybe it was seeing all those missed calls from my family. realizing I'd become the kind of daughter who wasn't reachable in a crisis. "I'm going home tomorrow," I said quietly. Marcus turned, and I saw a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "No, Madeleine, you're not. You can't stop me. Can I?" He moved closer, his voice dropping to that soft, deadly tone I'd learned to fear. "Who do you think got you the internship at Morrison Media? Who introduced you to Professor Chen when you're failing statistics? Who's been supporting you, loving you, putting up with your family's dysfunction and your constant neediness?" Each word hit like a physical blow. "I never asked you didn't ask." "Of course you didn't ask. You never asked for anything because you know you don't deserve it. I chose to help you anyway because I saw potential in you that no one else did. And this is how you repay me? Running home to mommy the minute things get a little difficult? My father is in the hospital." "Your father is fine. Your family just wants to control you, to pull you back into their small-minded little world where everyone settles for mediocrity. Is that what you want? To end up like your mother, anxious and bitter, married to a man who couldn't even take care of his own health?" I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time in 3 years. "Don't talk about my family like that." Marcus laughed, a sound empty of humor. "Your family? These people who've been filling your head with poison about our relationship, who've never understood what we have together." "What do we have together, Marcus?" The question surprised me as much as it surprised him, because I'm starting to think I don't know anymore. His face changed then, shifting from anger to something almost pitying. "Oh, Maddie, you really don't see it, do you? You think you can do better than this? Better than me?" He gestured around the apartment we'd shared. "At the life he built for us. Look at yourself. Really look. You can barely function without me. You can't make decisions, can't handle criticism, can't even maintain friendships. You're broken. Sweetheart, damaged goods." The words hit their target perfectly, as they were meant to. But instead of crumpling, I felt something else, a tiny spark of the girl I used to be. "Maybe I am broken," I said slowly. "But I'd rather be broken alone than broken with you." That's when he delivered his final, calculated blow. "You'll never find anyone who could love you the way I did. You're too broken, Maddie. Too much work. Any man who gets close enough to see the real you will run. You'll be alone for the rest of your life. And you'll remember this moment, remember that you chose that loneliness over the only person who was ever willing to deal with your damage." I started packing that night while he slept. 3 years of my life folded neatly into boxes, my hands shaking as I tried to be quiet. By morning, I was gone. Dr. Sarah Chian's therapy notes were meticulous. I learned years later when I requested copies for insurance purposes. Page after page of careful observations about my trauma responses, attachment issues, and severe erosion of self-worth. What struck me most was how she documented my progress, or lack thereof, in those first few years after leaving. Marcus. Patient presents as hypervigilant and self-deprecating. One early note read. Repeatedly apologizes for taking up time and space. Exhibits classic signs of psychological abuse. I remember that first appointment so clearly. Sitting in Dr. Chan's office 6 months after the breakup, clutching a tissue box like a lifeline, trying to explain why I couldn't sleep, why I jumped. At sudden noises, why I'd stopped eating regular meals. "I think maybe he was right," I told her, the words barely a whisper. "Maybe I'm too broken to love." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the last time someone told you that you were worth loving before Marcus." I'd sat there for nearly 10 minutes, unable to answer. The years that followed felt like wandering through a desert. I moved back home briefly, watching my father recover from his heart attack while my mother hovered anxiously. They tried to be supportive, but I could see the questions in their eyes. How had their confident, accomplished daughter become this fragile, uncertain person? I dated because Dr. Chen said I needed to practice being social again. Each attempt was a disaster. There was Michael from the coffee shop, sweet and patient until I had a panic attack when he raised his voice slightly during a basketball game on TV. David, not my David, another David from my yoga class, who lasted 3 weeks before telling me I seemed like I was waiting for him to hurt me. James, the architect I met at Elena's wedding, who actually seemed promising until I realized I was unconsciously trying to mold myself into whatever I thought he wanted. When he told me he liked independent women, I pretended to enjoy hiking. When he mentioned loving spicy food, I forced myself to eat Thai curry that made me cry. The relationship ended when he caught me Googling, "What do architects like in a girlfriend?" on his laptop. "Why do you think you do that?" Dr. Chun asked during one session. "Do what?" "Change yourself to fit what you think others want." I stared at her diplomas on the wall, anywhere but her knowing eyes. Because maybe if I can figure out the right version of myself, someone will want to stay. Each failed relationship felt like proof that Marcus had been right. I was too damaged, too much work. I'd lie awake at night replaying his words. "Any man who gets close enough to see the real you will run." The worst part was that I'd started running from myself too. I'd taken a job at a small marketing firm in Chicago, grateful for work that didn't require too much creativity or risk. I lived in a studio apartment that I kept obsessively clean, as if perfect surroundings could somehow organize the chaos inside me. I had friendly acquaintances, but no close friends' friendship required vulnerability. And vulnerability felt too dangerous. My social media became a carefully curated lie. Photos of restaurant meals I'd eaten alone, captioned as if I was having the time of my life. Check-ins at events I'd attended by myself, desperately hoping someone would think I had plans, friends, a life worth envying. "I think I'm getting worse instead of better," I told Dr. Chun during our third year of sessions. "Healing isn't linear," she replied, but I could see the concern in her professional expression. The therapy notes from that period make difficult. Reading. Patient continues to exhibit signs of complex trauma, self-isolation increasing. Recommending adjustment to treatment plan. What Dr. Chun couldn't have written in those clinical notes was how the loneliness felt like drowning in slow motion. How I'd sometimes catch glimpses of a person I used to be laughing at a movie, getting excited about a news story only to remember that she was gone, replaced by someone who apologized for existing. Marcus had said I'd be alone, and for 5 long years, he was right. But what he hadn't counted on was that sometimes you have to walk through the wilderness to find your way home to yourself. The mirror in my bathroom became my enemy for a while until the night it became my salvation. Thought it was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, 5 years after leaving Marcus. I just ended things with Robert, a perfectly nice accountant who'd made the mistake of suggesting I was a little intense about needing to know his whereabouts all the time. "I'm not controlling," I'd snapped at him. "I just like to know where people are. It's called caring." But as I watched him pack his overnight bag with the same careful politeness I'd seen in every man who'd walked away from me, I heard an echo that made my blood run cold. "You're too much work, Madeleine," Robert said gently, kindly, as he headed for the door. "I think you need to figure some things out." The door closed with a soft click, and I found myself alone again. Completely, utterly alone, just as Marcus had predicted. I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, 30 years old. Dark circles under my eyes, shoulders permanently hunched as if bracing for the next blow. And for the first time in years, I really looked at myself. Not the careful, practiced glances while applying makeup or checking my appearance before dates, but a long, honest assessment of who I'd become. "You're doing it again," I whispered to the woman in the mirror. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just attracting men who would abandon me. I was actively recreating the dynamic with Marcus. The hypervigilance I called caring. The need to know everything, control everything, predict everything. The way I changed myself to fit what I thought they wanted, then resented them for not seeing the real me I'd never actually shown them. Was so terrified of being abandoned that I'd turned myself into the very thing that drove people away. Standing there at 3 a.m, mascara streaked down my cheeks. I finally understood what Dr. Chun had been trying to tell me for years. I wasn't healing from Marcus. I was still living in the prison he built for me, just from the inside now. "Any man who gets close enough to see the real you will run," his voice echoed in my memory. But who is the real me? I asked my reflection. Do I even know anymore? The woman in the mirror had no answer. She looked as lost as I felt. I thought about my college acceptance letter buried somewhere in storage. I thought about the journal entries documenting my slow disappearance. I thought about all the men I'd pushed away while desperately trying to hold on to them. All the friends I'd lost while trying too hard to be what they wanted. Marcus had said I was broken and I'd spent 5 years proving him right. Not because it was true, but because I'd never learned to be anything else. The next morning I called Dr. Chun. I want to start over, I told her. Not just therapy, everything. I want to figure out who I actually am when I'm not terrified of being abandoned. What's changed? She asked. I looked around my sterile apartment with its beige walls and carefully arranged furniture that revealed nothing about the person who lived there. I realized I've been so scared of becoming the person Marcus said I was that I never tried to become anyone else. I've been living his prediction instead of my life. That conversation led to the hardest work I'd ever done, not just healing from trauma, but excavating myself from underneath years of careful self-protection. Learning the difference between boundaries and walls, between self-awareness and self-criticism, between solitude and isolation. Thought it would take 2 more years before I met David. But that night in front of the mirror was when I finally started the journey back to myself. The stack of self-help books on my nightstand grew taller each month, their colorful spines a testament to my determination to rebuild myself from the ground up. The gifts of imperfection, attached. Why does he do that? Each one offering pieces of a puzzle I was finally ready to solve. Dr. Chun had recommended some of them, but others I discovered through late-night internet searches when I couldn't sleep. I'd always been embarrassed by self-help books before, viewing them as admissions of failure. Now I saw them as tools, no different from the textbooks I'd studied in college. The breakthrough came with Wendy Bancroft's Why Does He Do That? I'd read it in one sitting on a Saturday afternoon, recognizing Marcus in nearly every page. But more importantly, I recognized myself not as the broken woman he convinced me I was, but as someone who'd survived something that had names, patterns, explanations. It wasn't my fault, I said aloud to my empty apartment. The words feeling foreign in my mouth. I started keeping a new journal. This one focused not on what was wrong with me, but on what was right. Small things at first. I made excellent coffee this morning. I chose the restaurant tonight because I actually wanted to eat there, not because I thought someone else would like it. I disagreed with my coworker about the project timeline and stated my opinion clearly. Dr. Chun called it mindful self-compassion, but I thought of it as learning to be my own friend. For 30 years, I'd been my own worst critic. What would happen if I tried being my own advocate instead? The work was exhausting. Some days, I'd catch myself falling back into old patterns, apologizing for having opinions, second-guessing every decision, scanning other people's faces for signs of disapproval. But now I noticed when it happened, and I could choose differently. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try, but had never mentioned to Marcus because he would have found it frivolous. My first few attempts were laughably bad, lopsided bowls that collapsed under their own weight, mugs with handles that broke off when they dried. But watching something take shape under my hands, imperfect but uniquely mine, felt revolutionary. I'm terrible at this, I told Janet, the instructor, after my 4th failed attempt at centering clay. You're learning, she corrected gently. That's different. I started saying no to things. Small no's at first, declining drinks with coworkers when I was tired, choosing not to attend Elena's friend's baby shower because I didn't know anyone there and didn't want to spend my Saturday making small talk. Each no felt like a tiny rebellion against the people-pleasing machine I'd become. The bigger challenge was learning to say yes to my own desires, to opportunities that excited me, to the possibility that I might deserve good things. I'd gotten so used to denying myself anything that felt too bold or risky that I'd forgotten what I actually enjoyed. I started volunteering at a literacy program downtown, helping adults learn to read. Something about their courage showing up week after week to tackle something so fundamental that most people took for granted inspired me. I saw echoes of my own journey in their determination to build skills they'd never had the chance to develop. "You're good at this," said Maria, one of my students, after I'd helped her sound out a particularly challenging paragraph. "You're patient." When was the last time someone had described me that way? Marcus had always said I was needy, demanding, exhausting. But here was evidence that I could be something different. I began setting boundaries with my family. 2. When my mother made her usual anxious comments about my single status, I responded calmly. "I'm working on building a good relationship with myself right now. When I'm ready for partnership, I'll know." When Elena pushed me to join dating apps, because you're not getting any younger, I said, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not looking for advice about my love life right now." The old me would have apologized for setting boundaries, would have explained and justified until the other person felt comfortable again. The new me was learning that other people's discomfort with my boundaries wasn't my responsibility to fix. 6 months into this intensive self-work, I realized I'd stopped checking my phone compulsively. I'd stopped rehearsing conversations before having them. I'd stopped automatically scanning rooms for exits when I felt overwhelmed. Instead, I'd started looking forward to Saturday mornings alone with my coffee and whatever book I was reading. I'd started wearing colors I liked instead of the safe neutrals I thought made me invisible. I'd started having opinions about movies, restaurants, politics opinions that were mine, not carefully calibrated to match whoever I was trying to impress. The woman in the mirror still looked like me, but she stood differently now. Straighter, less apologetic, more curious about the world than afraid of it. I still had work to do, years of it probably. But for the first time since I was 18, I was excited to find out who I was becoming. The promotion letter arrived on a Thursday morning, official letterhead announcing my appointment as Senior Communications Manager at Morrison & Associates. I stared at it for a full minute before the reality sank in. I'd gotten the job I'd been afraid to even apply for. 3 years of intensive self-work had changed more than just my personal relationships. As I'd learned to advocate for myself in therapy and in my daily life, I'd started doing the same at work. The timid woman who apologized for having ideas had been replaced by someone who spoke up in meetings, volunteered for challenging projects, and miraculously didn't crumble when her suggestions were challenged or rejected. "You've been different lately," my colleague Rachel had mentioned a few months earlier. "More present, I guess. Like you're actually here instead of just going through the motions." She was right. For years, I'd treated my job as a place to hide somewhere I could perform competence without risking too much of myself. I'd deliberately chosen a small firm where the stakes felt manageable, where I could blend in the background and collect a paycheck without having to worry about standing out. But as I'd grown more comfortable with taking up space in my personal life, I'd started taking up space professionally too. I pitched a social media campaign that increased our biggest client's engagement by 40%. I'd identified a gap in our services and proposed a new division focusing on crisis communications. I'd even disagreed with my boss, James, about a strategy decision respectfully but firmly and lived to tell about it. I have to ask, James had said when he called me into his office to discuss the promotion, "What changed?" "You've always been competent, but this past year you've been exceptional. It's like you found your voice." I thought about his question for days afterward. What had changed wasn't just my confidence, it was my relationship with failure. The old Madeleine had been paralyzed by the possibility of making mistakes, of being judged, of confirming everyone's worst assumptions about her capabilities. The new Madeleine understood that mistakes were information, not verdicts. When the crisis communications proposal was initially rejected, I didn't take it as proof that I was presumptuous or naive. Instead, I asked for feedback, revised my approach, and presented it again with better market research. When a client complained about my handling of their account, I didn't spiral into self-recrimination. I scheduled a meeting, listened to their concerns, and developed a plan to address them. The promotion came with a corner office and a $20,000 raise. But more importantly, it came with respect. People started seeking out my opinion. Junior staff members asked for mentoring. Clients specifically requested to work with me. I celebrated by taking myself to dinner at the restaurant I'd been wanting to try alone. Because I'd learned that solitude didn't always mean loneliness. Sitting at a table for one with my promotion, letter propped against the wine glass. I felt something I hadn't experienced since college. Pride in my own accomplishments. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Mom told me about your promotion. So proud of you. Want to go out this weekend and celebrate? The old me would have deflected, made the achievement seem smaller, worried about appearing boastful. Instead, I typed back, yes! I worked really hard for this, and I want to celebrate properly. Dr. Chen smiled when I told her about the promotion during our next session. How does it feel to be recognized for your actual abilities? Scary, I admitted. But good scary. Like, I'm finally showing up as myself instead of as who I think other people want me to be. The success at work had a ripple effect on other areas of my life. I started saying yes to social invitations I would have declined before work happy hours, professional networking events, even a weekend conference in Denver that required me to travel alone and make small talk with strangers at the conference. I met Sarah Kim, a communications director from Seattle who was funny, brilliant, and completely unimpressed by people who tried to seem more important than they were. We bonded over terrible conference coffee and ended up staying up until 2 in the morning talking about everything from media ethics to our shared love of mystery novels. You should visit Seattle, Sarah said as we exchanged business cards. I know some great hiking trails if you're into that. I've never really been hiking, I admitted. Even better. First times are the best times. On the plane home, I realized I'd made a friend, not someone I was trying to impress or manage, but someone who liked me for who I actually was. It had been so long since that happened that I had forgotten what it felt like. The promotion letter now sits framed in my home office. Not because I need the validation anymore, but because it represents something bigger than a job advancement. It represents the moment I stopped hiding from my own potential and started believing I deserved to succeed. Marcus had said I'd never amount to anything without him. Looking at that letter, I realized I'd amounted to something much better than I ever could have with him. I'd become myself. The coffee shop receipt is still tucked into my journal from that day, March 10th, 2022. 2:47 p.m., 1 large cappuccino, extra shot. Such a mundane piece of paper to mark the moment my life changed direction. I'd been having a terrible day. The morning client meeting had run long, making me late for lunch with Sarah Kim, who was visiting Chicago for work. Then Sarah had to cancel last minute due to a family emergency, leaving me sitting alone in Brew and Bean with an hour to kill before my next appointment. I was deep in my laptop, working on a presentation about brand messaging, when someone cleared their throat beside my table. Excuse me, I'm really sorry to bother you, but would you mind if I borrowed your phone charger? Mine just died, and I'm waiting for an important call about my daughter. I looked up to see a man about my age, sandy brown hair slightly mussed, holding a dead phone with an apologetic expression. He was wearing a well-worn flannel shirt and jeans with paint stains on them, and there was something immediately disarming about his genuine concern. Of course, I said, unplugging my charger and handing it to him. Take your time. You're a lifesaver. I'm David, by the way. David Chun. Madeleine. And don't worry about it, I've been there. He plugged in his phone at the outlet near my table and sat down in the chair across from me, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. You look very focused. Just work stuff. Nothing that can't. Wait, I gestured to his paint-stained clothes. Are you an artist? David laughed, a warm sound that made me realize I was genuinely curious about his answer, not because I was trying to make conversation, but because I actually wanted to know. I teach high school art, actually. The paint is from today's ceramics class. 15-year-olds in wet clay, it gets messy fast. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with relief. That's her. My daughter, Lily, she's 11, and she just got picked for the school science fair. I promised I'd take her out to celebrate. There was such pure joy in his voice when he talked about his daughter that I found myself smiling. That's wonderful. What's her project on? Renewable energy. She's building a working model of a wind farm. His eyes lit up. She's been planning it for months. researching different turbine designs, calculating efficiency ratios. She's way smarter than I was at her age. I dated men who mentioned their children like obligations, burdens, complications that potential partners would have to navigate. David talked about Lily like she was the best thing that ever happened to him. She sounds amazing, I said, and meant it. She is. Her mom and I were divorced, but we're lucky. Lily's got 2 parents who adore her and actually get along. He paused, studying my face. I'm sorry, I'm probably oversharing. I just get excited talking about her. Don't apologize. It's nice to hear someone talk about their kid like that. His phone was charged enough to make his call, but he didn't immediately leave. Can I ask what you do? Besides rescue strangers with dead phones, communications consulting. I help companies figure out how to tell their stories better. That's fascinating. Do you enjoy it? The question caught me off guard, not because it was unusual, but because of how he asked it. Not is business good? Or do you make decent money, but whether I actually enjoyed my work? I do, actually. More than I expected to when I started. I closed my laptop, realizing I was more interested in this conversation than in my presentation. What about you? Always wanted to teach? My original plan was to be a starving artist, but turns out I'm not great at starving. He grinned. Teaching lets me make art and help kids discover what they're passionate about. Plus, I get summers off to spend with Lily. We talked for another 20 minutes about everything and nothing, his students, my clients, the book he was reading, the podcast I've been binge listening to. The conversation flowed so easily that I forgot to analyze it, forgot to worry about whether I was saying the right things or coming across the right way. When he finally had to leave to pick up Lily, he hesitated at my table. This might be presumptuous, but would you maybe want to get coffee again sometime without the phone emergency? I felt the familiar flutter of panic, the voice that whispered about all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons I should protect myself. But there was something else too, something quieter but stronger. Curiosity about this man who clearly loved his daughter, who asked if I enjoyed my work, who had sat with a stranger and made her feel heard. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. He smiled, not the calculated charm I'd learned to mistrust, but something genuine and slightly nervous. Great, can I get your number? As I watched him program my contact information into his phone, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to a first date, not because I was trying to prove something or fill a void, but because I was genuinely interested in getting to know someone better. The coffee shop receipt became a bookmark in my journal, marking not just a random Tuesday afternoon, but the beginning of learning what it felt like to be chosen by someone who saw me clearly and liked what he saw. I keep David's letters in a wooden box my grandmother gave me, 43 handwritten notes spanning our first year together. Not love letters exactly, but something more precious, evidence of how someone can see you clearly and choose to stay. First one came after our third date, slipped under my apartment door while I was at work. Madeline, thank you for dinner last night. I had a great time talking about your literacy volunteer work. It's clear how much you care about your students. I was thinking about what you said about Maria struggling with confidence, and I wondered if you'd seen this article about adult learning strategies. No pressure, just thought it might be helpful. Looking forward to seeing you Friday. David, I read it 3 times, searching for hidden meanings or manipulation tactics, but found only genuine thoughtfulness. He'd listened to me talk about my volunteer work and remember details, then followed up with something useful rather than empty flattery. It was so different from the relationships I'd known before. Marcus had showered me with expensive gifts and grand gestures that felt more like claims of ownership than expressions of affection. Previous boyfriends had either overwhelmed me with intensity or kept me at arm's length with casual indifference. David did neither. He was consistent, patient, and refreshingly direct about his intentions. I like you, he said after our 5th date, walking me to my door. I'm not playing games or trying to figure out the right timing to call. I'm interested in getting to know you better, and I hope you feel the same way. The honesty was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. I do feel the same way. But I should probably tell you that I'm not great at relationships." He smiled. "Good thing we're not in a relationship yet. We're just two people who enjoy each other's company, figuring out if we want more than that." That became his approach to everything, removing the pressure while remaining genuinely engaged. When I canceled plans because I was overwhelmed with work, he didn't take it personally or guilt me about it. He simply said, "Let me know when you're free. I'll be here." When I had a panic attack during a movie because the male lead reminded me too much of Marcus, David didn't demand explanations or try to fix me. He just held my hand in the theater lobby until my breathing returned to normal, then drove me home without making me feel broken or dramatic. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked as we sat in his car outside my apartment. "Not really." "Not yet. Okay, when you're ready, I'm a good listener. And if you're never ready, that's okay too." The letters documented our slow, careful courtship. Notes about articles he thought I'd find interesting, sketches he'd made during faculty meetings, observations about movies we'd watched together. One arrived after I told him about my history with Marcus. "Madeline, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Thank you for trusting me with something so personal. I can't imagine how difficult that relationship must have been, or how much courage it took to leave. I want you to know that healing doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline, and I'm not going anywhere while you figure things out. You're worth waiting for." David, I cried reading that one, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen as someone worth patience rather than someone requiring it. Meeting Lily was a milestone I'd been dreading. I'd never dated someone with children before, and the stakes felt impossibly high. What if she didn't like me? What if I said the wrong thing? What if David saw me interact with his daughter and realized I wasn't mother material? "She's going to love you," David said, as we walked up to his ex-wife's house to pick up Lily for our planned trip to the Science Museum. "But even if she doesn't, immediately warm up, that's normal. She's protective of our family dynamic." Lily was a smaller female version of David's same thoughtful eyes, same easy smile, same tendency to ask questions that made you think harder than you expected. She was polite but reserved during our first meeting, clearly sizing me up. "Dad says you help adults learn to read," she said as we walked through the museum's renewable energy exhibit. "I do. It's one of my favorite things." "That's cool. Some kids in my class make fun of people who can't read, but I think that's stupid. Everyone learns different things at different times." I looked at David, who was pretending to study a display about solar panels while obviously listening to our conversation. "You're absolutely right. Some of my students are incredibly smart. They just never had the chance to learn when they were your age. Like my friend Marcus's grandpa," Lily said. "He came from another country and had to work instead of going to school. But he knows everything about fixing cars." The casual mention of the name Marcus made me flinch slightly, but Lily didn't notice. She was too busy explaining her science fair project and asking if I knew anything about aerodynamics. Later, as David walked into my car, I felt like I passed some kind of test, not Lily's, but my own. "You were great with her," he said. "She's an amazing kid. You should be proud." "I am. And I'm proud of you too for being willing to meet her. I know that was scary." That night, I found another note slipped under my door. Madeleine Lily asked if you could come to her science fair presentation next month. She said you asked really good questions and she wants to practice her explanation on someone who doesn't already know everything about her project. I told her I'd ask, but no pressure if you're not ready for that level of family involvement. Either way, today was perfect. Thank you for being yourself with both of us. David, I called him immediately. Yes to the science fair. And David, thank you for letting me take this slowly. Thank you for being worth the wait. 6 months in, I realized I'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. David's consistency had proven itself over time, and more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I could be in a relationship without losing myself in it. I had kept my own friends, my own interests, my own opinions. I hadn't transformed into whoever I thought he wanted me to be. Instead, I'd become more myself than I'd been in years, funnier, more relaxed, more willing to take up space. Love, it turned out, wasn't about becoming smaller to fit into someone else's life. It was about expanding to make room for someone else in yours. The engagement ring sits in my jewelry box now, retired after 5 years of marriage in favor of my simple wedding band. But I still take it out sometimes, remembering the moment David slipped it onto my finger and how it felt like putting on a new version of myself. It happened on a Saturday morning in November, 18 months after we'd first met. Not during a romantic dinner or exotic vacation, but in my kitchen while I was making pancakes, and David was reading the newspaper aloud to me, a lazy weekend tradition we developed. "Listen to this," he said, looking up from the arts section. "There's a new exhibition opening at the Art Institute next week. Contemporary ceramics. Want to check it out?" "Definitely." Maybe Lily would be interested too? I'd grown comfortable including his daughter in our plans, and she'd started asking when I was coming to dinner, treating me less like an intruder and more like family. She'd love that. Actually, speaking of Lily, David folded the paper and stood up, suddenly looking nervous in a way that made my stomach flutter. "She's been asking me something lately, and I told her I needed to talk to you about it first." I turned from the stove, spatula still in hand. "What kind of something?" "She wants to know when we're getting married." The pancake batter sizzled in the pan, but I barely heard it. "Oh, not because she's trying to rush anything," David said quickly, "but because she's 11 and she's practical, and in her mind, people who love each other and want to be together forever should make it official. Her words, not mine." I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. "What did you tell her?" "That marriage is a big decision that adults need to talk about together." He took a step closer. "But the truth is, I've been thinking about it too. Not because of pressure from an 11-year-old, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. This felt different from the casual mentions of future plans we'd been making, talking about next summer's vacation, discussing which movies we wanted to see over the holidays. This felt real and immediate and terrifying. "David, before you say anything, let me say something first." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know you've been hurt before. I know you have reasons to be careful about forever promises. But I also know that what we have is real, and I want to build a life with you. Not because I think you need rescuing or fixing, but because you make me happier and more myself than I've ever been." He opened the box to reveal a simple solitaire diamond on a platinum band, elegant, classic, nothing flashy or overwhelming. "I picked this out 3 months ago, but I've been waiting for the right moment. Then I realized the right moment isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about being ready to choose each other every day, even when it's hard." I looked at the ring, then at David's face, and felt something click into place. Not the desperate, grabbing for security I'd felt with Marcus, but a calm certainty that felt like coming home. "I need to turn off the stove," I said, which wasn't what either of us expected me to say. David laughed nervously. "Okay?" I flipped the pancake, turned off the burner, and set down the spatula. Then I turned back to face him, really face him, and let myself feel the full weight of what he was offering. "You know, I come with baggage," I said. "Everyone does. I come with an ex-wife and a preteen daughter and a tendency to grade papers during dinner. You come with a complicated past and trust issues and an unhealthy obsession with true crime podcasts. We're both works in progress. I might have panic attacks sometimes. I'll learn how to help. I might need therapy forever." "Good. It means you're committed to being the healthiest version of yourself. I might not be good at this. At being married, at being a stepmother, at any of it." David stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Neither might I. But I'm willing to figure it out with you if you're willing to figure it out with me." I thought about Marcus's cruel prediction, about all the years I believed I was too broken for love. I thought about the woman I'd been when I met David, guarded, careful, convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. And I thought about who I'd become in the 18 months since, someone who could trust, who could be vulnerable, who could love without losing herself. Yes, I said, and felt the words settle into my bones like truth.
Yes, I want to marry.
You. He slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, and I was amazed by how right it felt. Not heavy or foreign, but like it belonged there. Like I belong there. I love you, he said, kissing me softly. All of you. The healed parts and the parts that are still healing, and the parts that will always be a little tender.
I love you,
too, I said, and meant it completely. Not the desperate, clinging love I'd mistaken for the real thing before, but something steady and sure and built on the foundation of knowing myself. Later, we called Lily to tell her the news. Her shriek of excitement was so loud we had to hold the phone away from our ears. Finally, she said. I was starting to think you two were never going to figure it out. Can I help plan the wedding? And can I call you my stepmom now? Because I've been wanting to, but Dad said I had to wait until it was official. Hanging up the phone, I looked at my left hand and saw not just a ring, but proof that Marcus had been wrong about everything. I wasn't too broken for love. I wasn't too much work. I was just someone who needed time to heal and who'd been lucky enough to find someone willing to love me through that healing. The pancakes were cold by then, but neither of us cared. We were too busy planning a future neither of us had been sure we deserved. The wedding dress hangs in my closet now, preserved in a garment bag that I open sometimes just to remember. Not the dress itself, though it was beautiful, simple ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, but what it represented. Proof that I was someone who got to have a wedding. Someone who got to wear white and make promises about forever shopping for it had been an emotional minefield I hadn't anticipated. Elena, my mother, and Lily had accompanied me to the bridal salon. All of them more excited than I was prepared to handle. This is so exciting, Elena gushed as we walked through racks of gowns. I can't believe my little sister is getting married.
But
as the consultant pulled dress after dress for me to try, I felt myself shutting down. Each gown felt like a costume for a role I wasn't sure I could play. Who was I to walk down an aisle in white? Who was I to stand in front of everyone I loved and promise forever when I'd once been so broken that the man who claimed to love me said I'd never find anyone else?
What's wrong, honey?
My mother asked when I emerged from the dressing room in the third dress, my eyes red with tears I couldn't explain. I don't know if I deserve this, I whispered. Lily, wise beyond her 11 years, looked up from the fashion magazine she'd been flipping through. Deserve what? The dress or the wedding? Any of it. This whole thing. Maybe I'm just pretending to be someone who gets happy endings. Elena sat down beside me on the fitting room bench. Maddie, you've been through hell and came out the other. Sighed, if anyone deserves happiness, it's you. But what if I mess it up? What if I'm not good at being married? What if David realizes he made a mistake? My mother, who had watched me struggle through the Marcus years and the healing that followed, took my hands in hers. Sweetheart, I've watched David with you. I've seen how he looks at you, how he talks about you when you're not around. That man knows exactly who he's marrying, and he can't wait to do it. Lily nodded solemnly. Dad's been different since he met you. Happier, and he talks about you all the time. It's actually kind of gross. Despite myself, I laughed. Gross how? He gets this dopey smile when he reads your texts. And last week he spent 20 minutes at the grocery store trying to pick the perfect apples because he remembered you saying you liked the crisp ones. The image of David carefully selecting apples made something loosen in my chest. This was real. This man who noticed my preferences and remembered my favorite things wasn't going anywhere. When I tried on the fourth dress, the one that would eventually become mine, something shifted. It wasn't about deserving or pretending. It was about choosing. Choosing to believe in love, choosing to trust David's commitment, choosing to step into a future I thought was impossible. That's the one, Elena said softly when I emerged from the dressing room. How do you know? Because you're standing differently. Like you belong in it. The months that followed were a whirlwind of decisions that felt both overwhelming and healing. David and I chose a small venue, a historic inn with gardens, where we could have both the ceremony and reception. We kept the guest list intimate, family, close friends, the people who had supported us individually and as a couple. I asked Dr. Chen if she wanted to come, which surprised her. That's very kind of you, but I don't typically attend patients' weddings. You're not just my therapist, I said. You're someone who helped me become the person who could get married. I wouldn't be here without you. She accepted with tears in her eyes. David's ex-wife, Jennifer, was gracious about the whole thing. Even helping Lily pick out a dress for her role as junior bridesmaid, the three of us had coffee together one afternoon to discuss how our new family dynamic would work. I'm not trying to replace you, I told Jennifer. I know you're Lily's mom, and I respect that completely. I appreciate that. But I also want you to know that I'm grateful David found you. Lily adores you, and I can see how happy you make both of them. Planning the wedding became less about creating a perfect event and more about celebrating the community that had supported our journey. Sarah Kim flew in from Seattle to be my maid of honor. My literacy students made me a card that said, "Congratulations on your new chapter." My colleagues at work threw me a surprise shower that made me cry with gratitude, but it was the moments alone with David during the planning that meant the most. Sitting at our kitchen table with bridal magazines and vendor contracts, making decisions about flowers and music and whether to have an open bar, I kept being struck by how normal it felt. How right. What are you thinking about? David asked one evening as we addressed invitations. How different this is from what I imagined weddings were like. Different how? Less stressful. More ... collaborative. Like we're planning a party to celebrate something that already exists, rather than trying to create something from scratch. David set down his pen and looked at me. Is that good or disappointing? It's perfect. It feels like us. 3 weeks before the wedding, I had a moment. A panic at 2 a.m. I woke up in a cold sweat, Marx's voice echoing in my head. You'll never find anyone who could love you the way I did. But instead of spiraling, I got up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the same mirror where I'd had my revelation. Years earlier, the woman looking back at me was calm, confident, genuinely happy. She wasn't the broken girl Marcus had tried to convince her she was. She was someone who had done the work, faced her demons, and chosen love anyway. I climbed back into bed and curled up next to David, who stirred and automatically pulled me closer. Bad dream? He mumbled. Just old ghosts. They're leaving now. Good, they're not invited to the wedding. The wedding dress hanging in my closet now represents more than just a beautiful day. It represents the courage to believe I deserve beautiful days, the wisdom to choose a partner who saw my worth, and the strength to step into a future I built on the foundation of healing in 3 weeks. I would walk down the aisle to marry the man who loved all of me, the scarred parts and the strong parts, and everything in between. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right. Our wedding vows are framed on the bedside table now, handwritten in careful script on cream-colored paper. I read them sometimes when I need reminding of the promises we made, not just to each other, but to ourselves. The morning of our wedding dawned clear and crisp, October air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and new possibilities. I woke up in my childhood bedroom where I'd spent the night surrounded by Elena, Sarah, and Lily, who had declared it way more fun than a sleepover to get ready together. How do you feel? Elena asked as she helped me into my dress, her fingers careful with the tiny pearl buttons running up my back. Different than I expected, I said, watching my reflection as she worked. Calmer, like this is exactly what's supposed to be happening. No cold feet, no last-minute panic. I considered the question seriously. No, I'm nervous about walking down the aisle in front of everyone, but not about marrying David. That part feels like the most natural thing in the world. Lily, resplendent in her junior bridesmaid dress, was practicing her flower petal throwing technique near the window. My mom says the key to a good marriage is remembering to say thank you for the little things. Your mom is wise, I said, thinking about Jennifer's grace throughout this process. And my dad says the key is not going to get angry, but I think that's probably impossible because sometimes people are just grouchy when they're tired. Sarah laughed from where she was touching up her makeup. You're going to be an excellent marriage counselor someday, Lily. As we put the finishing touches on hair and makeup, I felt surrounded by love in a way that would have overwhelmed me just a few years earlier. But this morning, it felt exactly right. These women who had supported me through different chapters of my life, all here to witness the beginning of a new one. The ceremony was everything we dreamed of and nothing. Like the elaborate productions I'd seen in movies. Simple, intimate, focused on the words rather than the spectacle. As my father walked me down the aisle steady and healthy, fully recovered from his heart attack, I saw David waiting for me at the altar with tears in his eyes and the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He looked handsome in his navy suit, but more than that, he looked happy. Not nervous or uncertain or like he was making a huge life decision, but simply purely happy. When we reached the altar, my father kissed my cheek and whispered, "He's a good man, sweetheart. Be happy." David took my hands and I felt the rightness of it settle into my bones. This man who had seen me at my most fearful and most courageous, who had loved me through panic attacks and breakthroughs, who had never once tried to fix me but had simply walked alongside me as I fixed myself. Efficient, David's friend Pastor Williams began with words about love being a choice we make every day, not just a feeling we experience. As he spoke, I looked out at our guests, my parents, beaming with pride, Elena with tears streaming down her face, Dr. Chun, who had driven 2 hours to be there, my literacy students, who had become like family, David's teaching colleagues, Jennifer, supportive and gracious. Then it was time for vows. David went first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Madeleine, when I met you in that coffee shop, I thought I was just borrowing a phone charger. I had no idea I was meeting my future wife, my best friend, my partner and everything. You have taught me that love isn't about completing each other. It's about being complete individuals who choose to build something beautiful together. I promise to support your dreams, to celebrate your victories, to hold space for your healing, and to love all the versions of yourself you've been and are becoming. I promise to be honest, to be present, and to remember that choosing each other is something we get to do every single day for the rest of our lives." Then it was my turn. I looked into David's eyes and spoke words I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. But that came from the deepest part of my heart. "David, you found me when I was still learning how to trust myself, let alone someone else. You loved me patiently while I remembered how to be loved. You've taught me that healthy love doesn't make you smaller. It makes you more yourself. I promise to love you as clearly as you've loved me. I promise to communicate honestly, to support your dreams, to be a good stepmother to Lily, and to keep growing into the best version of myself. I promise to remember that what we have is precious and rare, and to protect it fiercely. Most of all, I promise to choose you every day, in the small moments and the big ones, for all the years we have together." When Pastor Williams pronounced U.S. husband and wife, David kissed me with such joy that I felt it radiate through my entire body. The applause from our guests seemed to come from very far away. All I could think was, I did it. I chose love, and it chose me back. At the reception. During our first dance to John Legend's All of Me, David whispered in my ear, "How does it feel to be Mrs. Chun?" "Like coming home," I whispered back and meant it completely. Later, as we cut the cake and made toasts and danced with our families, I kept catching glimpses of myself in the mirrors around the room. Each time, I was struck by how different I looked, not physically, but energetically. I was glowing with genuine happiness, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was. During the father-daughter dance, my dad said quietly, "I'm proud
Of you, Maddie."
not just for finding David, but for finding yourself first. Thank you for not giving up on me during the dark years. Never crossed my mind. I knew you'd find your way back to yourself eventually." As the evening wound down and David and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Lily hugged me tight and said, "Now you're officially my stepmom. Does that mean I can call you whenever Dad is being embarrassing?"
"Absolutely," I said, laughing.
"That's part of the job description." Driving away from the inn in David's car decorated with ribbons and cans, courtesy of his students, I looked at my wedding ring catching the light from the street lamps. It felt substantial but not heavy, meaningful but not overwhelming. It felt like a promise I was capable of keeping. No regrets? David asked as we pulled into traffic. Only one, I said. His face fell slightly. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to believe I deserved this. David reached over and took my hand, running his thumb over my new wedding ring. Perfect timing, he said. We met exactly when we were supposed to. As we drove toward our future together, I silently thanked the broken girl I used to be. Without her journey through darkness, I never would have recognized the light. The house keys sit in a small dish by our front door, worn smooth from 3 years of daily use. 2 sets mine and David's, along with a bright purple one we had made for Lily when she declared she was old enough to have her own key to our house. We bought the house 6 months after the wedding. A 1920s bungalow with original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a kitchen that needed updating but had good bones. It was the first time I'd ever chosen a place to live based on what I wanted rather than what was practical or safe or easy. What do you think? David asked as we walked through the empty rooms with our realtor, sunlight streaming through the windows and highlighting the potential in every corner. I stood in what would become our living room, imagining weekend mornings with coffee and newspapers, evenings when Lily would sprawl on the floor doing homework while we cooked dinner together. I love it, I said, and meant it completely. Even with all the work it needs, especially with all the work it needs. We get to make it ours. And we did. Over the next 2 years, we painted walls in colors we actually liked, warm yellows and soft blues, instead of the safe beiges I'd always chosen before. We planted a garden where Lily could grow vegetables for her science projects. David set up a studio in the basement where he could work on his art after school hours. I claimed the small room off the kitchen as my office, with windows overlooking the backyard and enough space for both my work computer and the novel. I'd started writing something I'd always dreamed of doing but had never felt brave enough to attempt. You're really doing it, David said one evening, finding me at my desk with pages of handwritten notes spread around my laptop. Trying to. It might be terrible. It might be amazing. Either way, you're doing it. That became our approach to everything, supporting each other's growth, even when it felt scary or uncertain. When David decided to apply for a master's program in art education, I helped him with his application essays. When I wanted to expand my volunteer work into running literacy workshops at the community center, he took over dinner duty 2 nights a week so I could prepare. We developed rituals that felt uniquely ours. Sunday morning pancakes that became elaborate brunches when Lily stayed over. Thursday evening walks around the neighborhood, no phones allowed, just conversation about our days. Monthly date nights where we tried new restaurants and pretended to be food critics, rating everything from ambiance to bathroom cleanliness. The challenges, when they came, felt manageable because we faced them together. When my father had another heart episode minor of his time, but terrifying nonetheless, David drove me to the hospital at 2 a.m. and sat in the waiting room for 6 hours without complaint. When Lily went through a difficult phase. At 13, testing boundaries and asserting independence in ways that made everyone's life temporarily miserable, we presented a united front while still honoring Jennifer's role as her primary parent. This is harder than I expected. I admitted to David one night after a particularly challenging evening with teenage Lily, who had declared that I wasn't her real mom and therefore couldn't tell her what to do. She doesn't mean it, David sighed, pulling me close. She's just testing to see if you'll stick around when things get difficult. What if I'm not good at this? What if I can't figure out how to be a stepmother? You're already figuring it out. You set boundaries with kindness. You respect her relationship with her mom, and you love her without trying to replace anyone. That's exactly what she needs, even when she's too frustrated to see it. He was right. Within a week, Lily had apologized and asked if I wanted to help her shop for a dress for the school dance. The crisis passed, but the lesson remained. Families are built through consistency, not perfection. My relationship with Jennifer deepened too, evolving from polite coexistence to genuine friendship. We started having coffee together monthly, coordinating schedules and sharing stories about Lily's latest achievements and challenges. I never thought I'd say this, Jennifer told me one afternoon, but I'm grateful David found you. Not just for him, but for Lily. She has another adult in her life who genuinely cares about her well-being. She's an amazing kid. You and David raised her well.
We did okay.
But having you in her life has given her something extra, another perspective, another source of support. That's a gift. The house filled with memories and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a life well lived. Game nights that went too late and left pizza boxes scattered around the living room. Birthday parties and holiday celebrations and quiet evenings when we were all content to be in the same space doing different things. I kept a gratitude journal during those years. Something Dr. Chun had recommended and that I'd initially resisted as too touchy-feely. But writing down 3 things I was grateful for each day became a way of documenting the richness of ordinary life. David's laugh when he reads funny articles aloud. Lily teaching me to braid friendship bracelets. The way our house smells. Like coffee and cinnamon on Sunday mornings. 3 years into marriage, I realized I'd stopped bracing for disaster. The hypervigilance that had once ruled my life had gradually faded, replaced by a calm confidence that what David and I had built together was solid and real. I think I finally understand what healthy love looks like, I told Dr. Chun during one of our now monthly sessions. How would you describe it? Boring in the best possible way. Not the drama and intensity I used to think meant passion, but just steady, reliable, like coming home every day to your favorite person. The house. Keys in the dish by our door represent more than just access to a building. They represent the choice to build something lasting, to create a home based on mutual respect and shared dreams rather than need or fear. Marcus had said, I'd never find love. What he couldn't have imagined was that I'd find something better: partnership, true companionship, and the daily choice to love and be loved by people who saw me clearly and chose to stay. The reunion invitation arrived on a Tuesday in March, mixed in with bills and grocery store circulars like it was just another piece of mail instead of a portal to the past. Thick cardstock with Northwestern's seal embossed in purple and gold. You're invited to celebrate 10 years. Northwestern University class of 2018 reunion. I stared at it for a long moment before setting it on the kitchen counter, where it sat for 3 days like an unexploded bomb while I decided how I felt about it. You're thinking really hard about something, David observed as he found me standing in the kitchen Friday morning, coffee cup in hand, still staring at the invitation. My 10-year college reunion. I can't decide if I want to go. He picked up the invitation, studying the details. When is it? Memorial Day weekend. They're doing a whole weekend of events, campus tours, class dinner, cocktail parties. I took the invitation back from him, running my thumb over the embossed lettering. I haven't been back to Northwestern since I graduated. Any particular reason you're hesitant? I could have given him the easy answer that reunions were generally awkward affairs where people competed to see whose life looked most impressive on social media. But David and I had built our relationship on honesty, especially about the difficult things. Marcus will probably be there, I said quietly. David's expression shifted slightly, not with jealousy, but with understanding. He knew the whole story, knew how Marcus had shaped my 20s in ways I was still sometimes discovering. How do you feel about that possibility? I don't know. That's the problem. I sat down at our kitchen table, suddenly needing the stability of solid ground beneath me. For years, the thought of seeing him again terrified me. I used to have nightmares about running into him somewhere, about him seeing how small my life had become and feeling vindicated. And now I'm not sure what I feel. Curious, maybe? Like, I want to see who he is 10 years later and who I am in relation to him. David poured himself coffee and sat across from me. That sounds like growth or masochism. I can't tell, he smiled. Probably a little of both. But you're not the same person you were 10 years ago, Maddie. You're not even the same person you were 5 years ago when we met. He was right, of course. The woman who had fled Marcus's apartment with her life packed in boxes would never have survived seeing him again. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone who had done the work, built a life, created a family. I was someone who knew her own worth because she'd fought to discover it. What does your gut tell you? David asked. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine walking across Northwestern's campus, seeing the dorm where I'd lived freshman year, the buildings where I'd had classes, the coffee shop where Marcus and I had spent so many hours in what I thought was the greatest love story ever told. I think I want to go, I said slowly. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove something to myself. What's that? That I'm not afraid of my own history anymore. That evening, I called Elena to get her perspective. You want to go to your college reunion to potentially see the ex who psychologically tormented you for 3 years? She said, after. I'd explained the situation. Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? I'm 34, Elena. That's hardly midlife. Fine, quarter-life crisis. Same question. I laughed despite myself. I think I need to face him. Not for him, but for me. I need to see if I'm really as healed as I think I am. And what if you're not? What if seeing him brings back all the old feelings? Then David will drive me home and I'll schedule extra therapy sessions and remember that healing isn't linear. Elena was quiet for a moment. You really have changed, haven't you? What do you mean? The old you would have been making this decision, based on fear, either avoiding the reunion because you were scared or going because you felt like you had something to prove. This feels different, more intentional. She was right. The decision to attend didn't feel desperate or reactive. It felt like a choice I was making from a place of strength rather than weakness. Will David go with you? Elena asked. I haven't asked him yet. Part of me thinks I should do this alone. Part of you is an idiot. Take your husband. Let him see where you came from, and let yourself have support while you're doing this brave, possibly stupid thing. When I brought up the idea to David that evening, his response was immediate. Of course I'll come with you. I'd love to see where you went to school, meet some of your old professors if they're still around. Even if it means potentially meeting Marcus. Especially then. I'm curious about the man who was so threatened by your potential that he tried to convince you that you didn't have any. The way David said it matter of fact, without anger or defensiveness, reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him. He didn't see Marcus as competition or threat, but as someone who had fundamentally misunderstood what love was supposed to be. You realize this could be emotionally messy, I warned him. Most worthwhile things are. Besides, I'll be there to remind. You have who you are now if you forget. I filled out the RSVP form that night, checking the box for 2 attendees and providing our current address. As I sealed the envelope, I felt something I hadn't expected. Excitement. Not about seeing Marcus, but about the opportunity to walk through my past as the person I become. The invitation sits now in our home office filing cabinet, tucked between tax documents and insurance papers. Just a piece of cardstock. But also a decision point the moment I chose to stop running from my history, and instead walk toward it with confidence. In 10 weeks, I would return to Northwestern not as the broken girl who had left, but as a woman who built a beautiful life from the ashes of her worst experience. And for the first time since receiving that invitation, I couldn't wait to see what that felt like. The old photos scattered across our bed told 2 different stories. In the ones from freshman year, I'm bright-eyed and confident, arms thrown around dorm mates at orientation events, laughing at parties, posing with the acceptance letter I was so proud of. By senior year, the girl in the photos has shrunk literally and figuratively. Smaller smiles, shoulders hunched, standing slightly behind others instead of at the center. Look at this one, I said to David, holding up a picture from sophomore year Halloween party. I'm dressed as a 1950s housewife. I thought it was ironic at the time, but now I see it was aspirational. I was already trying to be the perfect supportive girlfriend. David studied the photo, then picked up one from freshman orientation. And here you are just a year earlier dressed as Wonder Woman. The contrast is striking. Marcus hated that costume. Said it was too attention-seeking. I gathered the photos into a pile, organizing them chronologically. I'm not sure why I thought looking at these would help me prepare for the reunion, but I needed to see the progression. to remember that what happened to me was real. The reunion was 2 weeks away, and I'd been doing what Dr. Chen called proactive emotional work, deliberately thinking through scenarios, identifying potential triggers, and developing coping strategies. It wasn't obsessing, it was preparation. "What's your biggest fear about seeing him?" David asked, settling beside me on the bed. "That I'll revert. That 10 years of growth will disappear the moment he looks at me with that expression he used. To get like I was a particularly slow child and needed things explained multiple times. And what evidence do you have that you'll revert?" I smiled, recognizing the therapy technique he was using. "Are you Dr. Chunning me right now? I've picked up a few things over the years." Humor me. I considered his questions seriously. Honestly, I don't have evidence that I'll revert. When I think about seeing Marcus now, I don't feel the old fear or the need to prove myself. Mostly I feel curious. And maybe a little sad for who I used to be. That sounds like the opposite of reverting. I know. Logically, I know I'm not the same person. But emotions aren't always logical. David picked up the Wonder Woman photo again. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at this?" "What?" "I see the woman I married. Confident, joyful, unafraid to take up space. That person didn't disappear during your relationship with Marcus. She just went underground for a while. But she's back now, stronger than ever." The validation felt good. But I knew the real test would come when I was actually face to face with the man who had convinced me. I was worthless. We spent the following Saturday doing something that felt both mundane and momentous. Shopping for reunion outfits. I'd agonized over what to wear, wanting to look successful but not trying too hard. Confident but not defensive. "What about this?" David asked, holding up a navy dress with a flattering cut. Too businesslike. I don't want to look like I'm going to a job interview. "This one?" He showed me a floral sundress that was pretty but safe. Too sweet. I look like someone's nice librarian. After an hour of rejecting options, I found it a deep green wrap dress that was sophisticated without being austere, fitted without being showy. When I tried it on, I looked like exactly who I was. A successful, confident woman comfortable in her own skin. "That's the one," David said when I emerged from the dressing room. "You look like yourself. Myself at 34, myself at 22.
Yourself.
Now, which is the best version yet. The night before we left for Northwestern, I had dinner with Dr. Chen, our first meeting outside her office in 8 years of working together. "This feels like a graduation of sorts," she said as we settled into a quiet corner booth at my favorite restaurant. "Are you ready? As ready as I can be? I've done the work. I know who I am now. I have support. But I also know that seeing Marcus might bring up unexpected feelings. And what will you do if it does? Remember that feelings aren't facts. Use the coping strategies we practiced. Lean on David. Leave early if I need to." Dr. Chun smiled. "You sound like someone who's prepared. For whatever happens." I feel like someone who's prepared for whatever happens. That's new for me. The woman who first came to my office wouldn't have been able to conceive of attending this reunion, let alone looking forward to it as an opportunity for closure.
She was right.
The broken girl who had stumbled into therapy 8 years ago had been so fragile that any reminder of Marcus sent her spiraling. This version of me was curious about what he'd become, confident enough in my own worth to face him without armor. "What do you hope to get out of this experience?" Dr. Chen asked. "Proof that I'm free. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. I want to see him and feel nothing but mild interest in how his life turned out. I want to introduce him to David and feel proud of the life I've built, instead of defensive about the life I left behind. And if you don't feel that way, if seeing him is harder than you expect, then I'll know I have more work to do, and that's okay too. Growth isn't about reaching some final destination where nothing ever hurts. It's about being able to handle whatever comes up." As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, Dr. Chun hugged me, something she'd never done before. "I'm proud of you," she said, "not just for surviving what you survived, but for choosing to thrive despite it." Driving home to David and our life together, I felt ready for whatever the reunion would bring. I had good armor, now not the brutal defensiveness I'd once worn, but the flexible strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you're worth. The girl in those old photos deserved to have her story rewritten. And the woman I'd become was finally strong enough to do it. The name tag felt heavier than it should have, just a small rectangle of paper, Madeleine Medina printed in cheerful purple letters. But seeing my name there, not Madeleine Caldwell, as I'd once imagined it would be, felt like a small victory I hadn't expected. "You ready for this?" David asked as we approached the registration table in Northwestern Student Center. He looked handsome in his dark jeans and button-down shirt, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his calm presence. Beside me, "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, accepting my name tag and information packet from the cheerful volunteer behind the table. The main reception was in full swing. When we entered the ballroom, 200 of my former classmates mingling with drinks and carefully modulated enthusiasm. I scanned the room automatically, looking for familiar faces while simultaneously bracing myself for the one face I most expected and dreaded to see. Madeline? Oh my God, Madeline Santos. I turned to see Jessica Park, my freshman year roommate, approaching with a huge smile. She looked exactly the same except for laugh lines around her eyes and a confidence that hadn't been there in college. "It's Medina now, actually," I said, returning her hug. "Jessica, you look amazing. How are you?" "Married, divorced, remarried to someone much better, living in Portland and running my own marketing firm." She delivered the update rapid fire, then looked curiously at David. "And you must be the husband who convinced her to take his name?" "Other way around," David said with a smile. "I'm David Chun. Madeline kept her own name, and I'm grateful she kept me too." I felt a warm glow at how naturally he said it, how he made our relationship sound like the equal partnership it was. "We need to catch up properly," Jessica said. "But first, are you prepared for the Marcus situation?" My stomach tightened slightly. What Marcus situation? He's here. With his third wife, I think. They got married 6 months ago. He's been holding court by the bar, telling anyone who'll listen about his successful consulting business and his house in Malibu. I felt David's hand find mine, warm and steady. "Thanks for the heads up," I said to Jessica. "We'll navigate it as it comes, you sure?" Because I could easily create a distraction. Remember how good I was at that freshman year? Despite my nerves, I laughed. "I remember, but I think I need to handle this myself." As Jessica melted back into the crowd, David squeezed my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous, but not panicked. That's progress, right? That's huge progress." We made our way through the room, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the conversations. My former classmates had become interesting adults, doctors, and teachers and entrepreneurs and parents. Many of them remembered me fondly, asking about my career and seeming genuinely pleased to hear about my success. "Madeline was always the smartest one in our journalism classes," said Tom Rivera, who now worked for the Chicago Tribune. "I'm not surprised you went into communications. Are you still writing?" "Actually, I just finished my first novel." I said, still amazed that I could say those words without feeling like a fraud. "That's incredible. What's it about?" As I found myself describing my book, a story about a woman rebuilding her life after trauma, I realized I was having fun. These are my people, my history, the good parts of my college experience that I'd let Marcus overshadow for too long. Then I saw him. Marcus was exactly where Jessica had said he'd be, standing near the bar with a small group gathered around him. He looked older, of course. His hairline had receded, and he gained weight around his middle, but his posture was the same. Chin slightly raised, shoulders back, commanding attention through sheer force of personality. The woman beside him was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of nervous energy I recognized in myself from 10 years ago. She laughed too loudly at his jokes and kept touching his arm as if seeking reassurance. "That's him," I said quietly to David. David followed my gaze and studied Marcus for a moment. "He's smaller than I imagined." "Smaller how?" "Just smaller. Less intimidating, more ordinary."
He was right.
From a distance, Marcus looked like exactly what he was, a middle-aged man trying too hard to be the center of attention. Not the powerful, charismatic figure who had once controlled my entire world, but someone desperate to prove his importance to anyone who would listen. "Do you want to approach him or wait for him to notice you?" David asked. Before I could answer, Marcus's eyes found mine across the room. I watched his expression change, surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like hunger. He said something to his wife and started walking toward us. "Here we go," I murmured. "Madeleine Santos," Marcus said as he approached, his voice carrying that same smooth confidence I remembered. I was wondering if he'd be here. "It's Medina now," I said calmly.
"Hello, Marcus."
His eyes flicked to David, then to the wedding ring on my left hand, and I saw something flash across his face, surprise, maybe even disappointment.
"This is my husband, David Chun," I continued.
"David, this is Marcus Caldwell." David extended his hand with easy confidence.
"Nice to meet you, Marcus."
"I've heard a lot about your time at Northwestern." It was perfectly polite and completely neutral, no hint that he knew the full story, but no warmth either. Marcus shook his hand, clearly trying to assess the dynamic. "So you got married," Marcus said, turning back to me.
"Congratulations."
I have to admit, I'm surprised. "Why would you be surprised?" I asked, genuinely curious about his answer. "Oh, he gestured vaguely. "After our relationship ended, you seemed to struggle with confidence issues, dating issues. I just wondered if you'd ever worked
through all that."
I felt the familiar curl of shame start at my stomach, the old programming that said his opinion mattered, that his assessment of my worth was accurate. But then I looked at David, who was watching Marcus with the kind of calm attention he'd give to one of his students, having a particularly transparent temper tantrum. "I did work through it," I said evenly. "Turns out I didn't have confidence. Issues I just needed to get away from people who undermined my confidence." Marcus's smile tightened slightly. "Well, you always were dramatic. I'm glad you found someone who appreciates that about you." The words were designed to hurt, to suggest that my emotional responses were excessive, that David was somehow settling for damaged goods. But instead of feeling stung, I felt something unexpected: pity. "Marcus," I said gently, "I hope you're happy, I really do. But I need you to know that you were wrong about me. About what I was capable of, about what I deserved. About my ability to build a healthy relationship. You were wrong about all of it." His face darkened. "I wasn't wrong about anything, Madeleine.
I loved you more than anyone ever will."
I put up with "No," I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm. "You didn't love me. You needed me to be
small so you could feel big.
You needed me to be broken so you could feel like a hero for tolerating me. That's not love. That's manipulation." Marcus looked like I'd slapped him. "You can't possibly believe I know what I experienced," I said. "And I know what real love looks like now. It doesn't tear people down. It doesn't make them apologize for existing. It doesn't predict failure and then work to ensure it happens."
"David!"
Stepped slightly closer to me, not protectively, but supportively. His presence reminded me that I wasn't the frightened girl who had fled this man's apartment. I was a woman who had built a beautiful life, who was loved for exactly who she was. "I should get back to my wife," Marcus said stiffly. "She's probably wondering where I went." "Of course," I said. "It was good to see you, Marcus. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." As he walked away, I felt something release in my chest, not the dramatic catharsis I'd maybe expected, but a quiet settling like a door closing on a room I no longer needed to visit. "How do you feel?" David asked softly. "Free," I said, surprised by how completely I meant it. "And grateful." "For what?" I looked around the room, at my former classmates, at the campus visible through the windows, at my husband who had driven 4 hours to support me through this moment I needed to have. For all of it. For surviving him, for leaving him, for finding you, for becoming someone strong enough to face him without flinching. I took his hand. For the life we've built together. Marcus had been wrong about everything about my worth, about my capacity for love, about my future. And seeing him now, diminished and ordinary, I realized his predictions had said everything about him and nothing about me. The girl he tried to destroy was gone, replaced by a woman he never could have imagined. And that felt like the most perfect revenge of all. The thank you card to Dr. Chen sits on my desk as I write this, ready to be mailed tomorrow morning. Simple white cardstock with a photo of David Lilly and me from last weekend's hiking trip, all of us mud-splattered and grinning, looking exactly like the family we've become. Dear Dr. Chen, I've written inside, thank you for helping me find my way back to myself. The woman who walked into your office 8 years ago could never have imagined the life I'm living now. Your patience, wisdom, and faith in my ability to heal made all the difference. With deepest gratitude, Madeleine. It's been 6 months since the reunion, and I keep expecting the feelings from that weekend to fade or change, but they haven't. If anything, they've grown stronger, this sense of completion, of having finally closed a chapter that needed closing. The drive home from Northwestern had been quiet at first, both David and I processing what had happened. About an hour outside Chicago, I'd finally broken the silence. I need to tell you something, I'd said. David had glanced over from the driver's seat, eyebrows raised. When Marcus walked away tonight, I realized something. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I felt sorry. For him, how? Sorry for him, how? He's 50 years old and he's still the same person he was at 25. Still needing to be the most important person in every room. Still needing someone else to be small so he can feel big. He hasn't grown at all. David had nodded thoughtfully. That must be exhausting. It must be. But mostly, it made me grateful. Grateful that I did the work to change, to heal, to become someone better. Grateful that I didn't stay stuck in that pattern. Grateful for anything else? I'd smiled, reaching over to take his hand. Grateful that his cruelty led me to therapy, which led me to healing, which led me to being ready for you when we met. If he hadn't broken me, I might never have learned how to put myself back together properly. That conversation had been a turning point, not just in my healing from Marcus, but in my understanding of my entire journey. Every painful step had been necessary. Every mistake had taught me something. Every moment of doubt had made the certainty I found with David more precious. Lily, now 15 and devastatingly perceptive, had noticed the change in me when she came for dinner the following weekend. You seem different, she'd said as we worked together in the kitchen, preparing her favorite pasta dish. Different how? Lighter. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. Could see everything, I'd realized. She'd been watching me carry the weight of my past for years without even knowing what it was. I went to my college reunion last weekend. I told her. I saw someone from my past who used to make me feel very small. And now I know I'm not small. I'm exactly the right size. Lily had grinned. Dad says you're perfect sized for hugging. Your dad is biased. Your dad is right, David had said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with that smile that still made my heart skip a beat. Work has continued to flourish. The novel I finished last year, the one about a woman rebuilding her life after trauma, found a publisher and will be released next spring. My communications consulting business has grown to the point where I'm considering hiring an assistant. I've been invited to speak at conferences about resilience and professional development, but the success feels different now than it would have 10 years ago. Then I would have used it as armor, as proof that I was worthy despite what Marcus had said about me. Now it simply feels like the natural result of showing up as myself in the world. The literacy program, where I volunteer, has become one of my greatest joys. Last month, Marie, the student I'd worried about all those years ago, graduated from the program and enrolled in community college. At her graduation ceremony, she thanked me for believing in her potential when she couldn't see it herself. You taught me that it's never too late to learn something new, she'd said. Not just reading, but believing in yourself. Sitting in that audience, watching this brave woman celebrate her achievement, I'd thought about all the ways we teach each other courage without even realizing it. David and I have started talking. About expanding our family maybe through adoption, maybe through fertility treatments, maybe by simply deepening our commitment to the family we already have with Lily. Whatever we decide, I know it will be a choice we make together, from a place of abundance rather than need. The conversation happened naturally, the way most important conversations do in healthy relationships. We were cleaning up after dinner one evening when David mentioned that one of his colleagues had just adopted a baby from foster care. How would you feel about something like that?
He'd asked, not pushing, but genuinely curious.
Terrified and excited in equal measure, I'd admitted. What about you? Same, but good terrified, not bad terrified. We're taking our time with the decision, researching options, talking to other families, making sure Lily feels heard in the process. There's no rush, no desperation. Just two people who love each other in their life together, considering how they might share that love more widely. The thank you card to Dr. Chun contains a photo, but it doesn't capture everything I'm grateful for. It doesn't show the Saturday mornings when David and I read the newspaper together in comfortable silence. It doesn't show the way Lily now texts me for advice about friend drama and school stress. It doesn't show the novel manuscript on my desk, or the speaking engagement calendar on my wall, or quiet confidence I feel walking through the world. Most importantly, it doesn't show the absence of fear that now characterizes my life. I no longer scan rooms for exits when I feel overwhelmed. I no longer rehearse conversations before having them. I no longer apologize for taking up space or having opinions or asking for what I need. The woman Marcus said would never find love has built a life so full of love that sometimes I have to stop and marvel at it. Love from David, whose constancy still amazes me after 5 years of marriage. Love from Lily, who has taught me that being a stepmother is less about replacing someone and more about expanding the circle of people who care about a child's well-being. Love from friends who see me clearly and choose to stay. Love from family who supported me through the dark years and celebrate with me in the bright ones. But perhaps most remarkably, I've learned to love myself not in the self-help book way that always felt forced and artificial, but in the quiet, daily way of someone who has fought for her own healing and won last week. I did something I would never have imagined possible 10 years ago. I ran into an old acquaintance who asked about Marcus, having remembered that we dated in college. Instead of feeling shame or needing to explain or justify what had happened between us, I simply said we weren't a good match.
I'm much happier now. That's it.
No drama, no detailed explanations, no need to make anyone understand the full story. Just the simple truth. We weren't a good match. And I'm much happier now, Dot, as I seal the envelope for Dr. Chun's card. I think about the girl who first sat in her office 8 years ago broken, afraid, convinced that she was fundamentally unlovable. That girl deserved compassion, not judgment. She deserved patience, not pressure. She deserved the chance to heal, even when healing felt impossible. She also deserved to know what I know now, that Marcus's predictions were never about her potential. They were about his fear of it. He saw her strength and tried to convince her it was weakness. He saw her capacity for growth and tried to convince her she was permanently damaged. He saw her ability to love deeply and tried to convince her that no one would ever love her back. He was wrong about everything. The life I'm living now, full of genuine partnership, meaningful work, deep friendships, and quiet joy is exactly the life he said I'd never have. Not because I proved him wrong out of spite, but because I stopped believing his lies and started believing in my own worth. Tomorrow, David and I are driving to visit his parents for the weekend. Lily will join US, and we'll spend Saturday afternoon teaching her to drive, a prospect that terrifies and delights us both. Sunday, we'll help his father in the garden and his mother in the kitchen, ordinary family activities that feel extraordinary to someone who once thought she'd never belong anywhere. The reunion showed me that I'm not running from my past anymore. I'm walking confidently into my future. A future that includes David's laughter, Lily's achievements, new books to write, new places to travel, new ways to contribute to the world. Marcus said I'd never find love again. And in a way, he was right. I didn't find love again, I found. If for the first time, real love Healthy love, the kind of love that makes you more yourself rather than less. The girl who packed her life into cardboard boxes and fled into the night deserved this ending. She deserved to become a woman who could wear her wedding ring with pride, who could face her past with confidence, who could build a future worthy of her dreams. She deserved to discover that sometimes the cruelest thing anyone can say to you becomes the very thing that sets you free. The end.